Joining us now is our special guest, a political analyst, John Kovalich. He's joining us live from Belgorod in Russia to discuss with us further the current situation in Turkiye with the local elections. Good evening, John. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Now, the local elections are crucial and are serving as a litmus test for Turkiye. But I want to start off by asking you that how would the results of these local elections, particularly in Istanbul, affect broader national politics and President Erdogan's policies?
I'm going to be a little probably counterintuitive. Most of the analysis will be that, if President Erdogan's party regains control of Istanbul and Ankara, then he is, set on a glide path to do pretty much, what he wants to do. I would suggest that winning is great, but I don't think it's going to be that disruptive if the incumbents remain in office in Istanbul and Ankara, because President Erdogan is still president. His party and the allies to his party still control the legislature. And so he still controls the mechanisms that make the federal government work and that have a lot of influence at the local level. For the incumbents, if they do prevail, they still have to get along with President Erdogan for the next 5 years of their term, the next 4 years of his term. So, optically, it'll be a story for a day if the incumbents remain in office. But practically, the trajectory of Turkiye, what President Erdogan wants to do domestically and globally, I don't think it's going to be all that impactful.
Okay. In what ways do you believe the People's Alliance, led by the AK Party and MHP, has strengthened its position and voter base? And how might this impact the outcome of the local elections, particularly in Istanbul?
Well, part of the major problem with anyone that's trying to oppose or the incumbents to stay in office and the candidates to replace them is, what is going to drive their vote? They step into the voting booth, and one of the events you have taking place this year is sort of the same you had last year, which is the opposition then to President Erdogan were more intent on disagreeing amongst themselves over who would be the big man on campus, that they forgot what their goal was. And the goal was to win the presidency. And they got all tied up with, all politics being local within their particular sects. Now you have sort of a same thing playing out again. You have people of Kurdish descent. Are they going to be looking at the economics? Are they going to be looking commercially, economically, financially, in terms of how they're doing today versus 5 years ago or 4 years ago or 3 years ago? Or is it more important for them to focus on issues that are important, political issues that are important to people of Kurdish descent? And then you have the rest of the current incumbents, parties that put them in the office, and it's the same sort of thing. Are they all going to get together? And they've all been fielding their own candidates, which of course makes it easier for an opponent to win, because it's less votes you've got to get because the others are all split up. So that I think is what we're going to be watching is just how broken up are the results, and is the winner actually going to have over 50%, or are we going to see another runoff?
Okay, now social media and digital platforms wield significant influence in shaping public opinion and electoral narratives, particularly among tech-savvy demographics in Istanbul. Now, what are some of your insights into the role of social media influencers and online disinformation campaigns in these local elections?
Well, disinformation is now the new COVID. It's a global pandemic. AI is a global pandemic, and it's playing in everywhere at all different levels. Even voter to voter. Not necessarily party to voter or a rogue actor or a government. Sometimes it literally is amongst a group, and they're just they're sending disinformation to one another and seeing who can figure it out. Young people, though, as they were last year. I mean, the polling outside of Turkey last year during the presidential election, it was indicating the young people were going to swing away from President Erdogan. That they were looking, as young people generally do. How much am I making today? Can I pay my phone bill? Do I have to live with my parents? Am I going to potentially get a promotion? Can I go on vacation? Can I go out to the restaurant? Is the lira better today than it was a day before? Is inflation lower? They tend to really look micro on issues. But last year in the presidential election, they surprised people where they looked at some other issues in terms of being Muslim and what that meant. And oftentimes there's a fine line between looking up to someone and looking past someone. And they decided that they were looking up to President Erdogan, not looking past him. Now you're here for these mayoral elections, particularly in Istanbul, where a lot of the young people, they're savvy, they're tech savvy, they're well-read, they're traveled. And, so how they communicate with one another, social media plays into that. The big question is going to be, where are they going to tip? And it would seem logical that they tip toward remaining with the incumbent, simply younger man, newness, some of the economic issues that are impacting them. But what we saw last year, they are not just voting with their cell phones and their pocketbooks. They're looking at other issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now looking ahead, how do you envision Turkey's political landscape evolving in the post-local elections period, and what key factors will shape the country's domestic and foreign policies in the coming years?
How Turkey is, re-engaging with many of the countries with which it hasn't commercially, economically, financially, politically during the last 5 or 10 years is going to be basically the driver for what Turkey looks like internally and how Turkey is perceived externally. President Erdogan, the last 2 years, and particularly the last 12 months and the last 6 months, he has very much been like, the Energizer Bunny. He's going to all of those capitals. And Egypt was a great example. Issues relating to the Muslim Brotherhood. El-Sisi. He's been, going basically saying, I've got another 5 years. You may not have another 5 years, but I've got another 5 years. So let's see what we can do. And the optics of Istanbul are important, but he is the president of the country. He does control the levers, and so far he's using them successfully. He's going to be visiting with President Biden in May, and then you're going to have the NATO gathering after that. Then you've got the UN General Assembly after that. Then you've got the G20 in Brazil after that. So there's just going to be a lot of places where President Erdogan is going to be able to remind people that Turkey never left, but it's pretty much roaring back.
Okay, John. Now, lastly, before I let you go, I'm interested in your opinion and perspective here as a foreigner who travels to Istanbul quite frequently. How have you viewed Istanbul in particular as a city, as a mega hub, since the incumbent of being from the major opposition party in Turkiye being in charge of this city that is so near and dear to Erdogan's heart?
Yeah, I do a lot of exploring. I'm curious. I go everywhere when I'm in Istanbul. I walk everywhere. I try to do loops, so I'll see the same places and see the same people and do the same things over certain time frames, so I can get some data points. When I look at the prior, 5 years ago. I also, you can't help but also remember Mayor Erdogan, and then Prime Minister Erdogan, and then President Erdogan, and also convict Erdogan. A lot of people don't remember that he was put in jail for a little while. So all of that trajectory, Istanbul is sort of Erdogan. Erdogan is Istanbul. Istanbul is Erdogan. There's no question the last 5 years have been challenging for the current mayor and their team. That is in some part because, again, the levers of government from the federal, and then working your way down to the city and the localities, still generally in the hands of the executive presidency and in the hands of the parliament, which is controlled by President Erdogan's party and the allies to his party. So it hasn't been completely clean sailing. Having said that, though, you would have thought that 5 years ago when they did win, and it was they had to run the election again, and then they won, and they won by more, that they really would have focused, one, on, like fixing the potholes. We used to have a senator in New York, Alphonse D'Amato, and they used to jokingly call him Senator Pothole, because he just focused on local, and that's what kept getting him reelected. And that's what mayors need to do. So if we do not have a change, then the current mayor is generally perceived as a potential candidate for president in 5 years. But if there is a change, then I think that President Erdogan, as he's already been doing, we've seen him when they've inaugurated new tunnels and new trains and new bridges, and he very much acts like he's still mayor. I think in some respects that's probably the best job he ever had, because he really could make things happen very, very quickly and impact people's lives almost instantaneously. So I'll be watching to see what happens. But from my perspective, I would have probably expected to see a little more change during the last 5 years, but Istanbul can't be stopped no matter who the mayor is. No.
Is it a disadvantage for a mayor if they're not from the ruling party, from your observation? This is including the United States, and have you observed this in Turkey as well?
Absolutely. It's just, all politics is local, and it's the levers of government. And at the mayor, when you get to the mayor level, if the governor, let's say in the United States, we have 50 states, and you have cities and towns, and they're run by mayors. Well, if the governor of the state is from a different party, you may have some problems. If your legislature, if your council in the city, the mayor could be of one party and the council could be controlled by another party. So having everything align where the mayor and the local legislatures are all of the same party certainly makes it easier to get things done. On the flip side, in the U.S., we see more of that, where everything aligns, you can also have less accountability because there isn't anybody waving a flag to say, hey, what about that? What about that? All countries are different. And so I would expect, as said, that if there's a change in leadership tonight in Istanbul, that people may start to jokingly call President Erdogan Mayor Erdogan again, because I think he's going to take a really strong interest in what happens, because it's his legacy. Now, he doesn't have to work on his legacy. I mean, his legacy's all fixed, but he's a politician, and so his final term as president, he's going to want to make Istanbul shine even more than it is.
John, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you.